So on Tuesday, 22 October, Russian President Vladimir Putin hosted the BRICS summit in Kazan on the Volga, one of Russia's iconic rivers. Um, and of course, BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but new members have joined, and other members are trying to join. So the new members include, for instance, Iran, our wonderful friend we've been speaking about, Egypt, Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates, in Kazan, amongst others, Venezuela, sorry, to join. But of course, Brazil didn't want Venezuela in. So it's one of those blocks that is increasing in size, and a lot of people see BRICS as a potential alternative to the West. Putin certainly sees so. Putin's key goal is to give BRICS heft by building, or one of his key goals is by building a new international payment system to attack America's dominance of global finance and shield Russia and its trading partners from sanctions. Now, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine on 24 February 2022, the West froze 282 billion of Russian assets held abroad. The US also disconnected, or let's say the West also disconnected Russian banks from SWIFT, which is used by some 11,000 banks around the world for cross-border payments. Russia also threatened secondary sanctions on banks in other countries that support Russia's war effort. This is what got a lot of countries nervous, including India, because, of course, they have been trading with Russia. They do buy energy from Russia. And this tsunami of sanctions has prompted central banks to accumulate gold and America's adversaries to try and move away from using the dollar for payments. By the way, China views the use of its dollar, the use of the dollar as one of its biggest vulnerabilities. So the argument from BRICS has been, and I've heard this many times from people from many countries, is that the US and its allies have weaponized the dollar, the euro, and the global financial system. The answer from the BRICS summit seems to be what Russia calls BRICS Bridge, which would let countries conduct cross-border settlement using digital platforms run by their central banks. Apparently, they are borrowing concepts from a different project called mBridge, part run by a bastion of the Western-led order, the Swiss-based Bank for International Settlements, BIS. Now, fundamentally, the BRICS summit is about national interest, and I'll let Glenn take over from here. If you are China, you do want to buy cheap Russian energy. Why would you pay an extra $10, $20, $30 per barrel? Especially when you are seeing a meltdown of your real estate market. If you're India, your per capita income is less than $2,500 per capita, as per last year's World Bank statistics. Why would you pay an arm and a leg, or let's say, why would you pay extra money for energy when the Russians are going to give it to you for discount? And mind you, that discount enables your central bank to have contend with less inflation and not raise interest rates too much. So it's in the interest of China, it's in the interest of India, it's in the interest of South Africa, it's in the interest of Brazil. All of these are poorer countries to trade with Russia, and indeed China. So they don't want to be prisoners of SWIFT. They don't want to be beholden to Western sanctions. And one of the things that is unstated is that a lot of the wealthy people in this country engaged in massive business who used to basically keep assets in the West as insurance are scared after Chelsea Football Club and yachts in Monaco were seized by the West. And they now are looking for newer ways to do business. And indeed, not just their central banks, but they themselves are buying gold, silver, palladium, and of course, other assets to hedge away from the dollar. Over to you, Glenn, as to what is happening. And let's get the American point of view.
I beg no American point of view. I am American, but but I'm not.
You're quite objective, Glenn. I'm
Chained to the
joking.
American point of view. No, I think fundamentally the underlying framework or issue or perception scheme is that everyone continues in the BRIC aspirants and members to read too much Rudyard Kipling and to imagine that somebody like me is hiding behind every bush and controlling every traffic light. This flippant way to say, to echo what you just said, which the BRICS organization, movement, approach is a clear effort to get out from under the what is widely perceived, not entirely wrongly, but substantially wrongly at the same time, of Western dominion, which means U.S. dominion. There are strong whiffs and odors of visceral and substantive anti-colonialism, anti-neocolonialism, anti-Westernism, anti-Americanism in all of this. And those who lived through the financial crisis in Asia, Southeast Asia, the late 1990s, or choose your any other issue, have some strong arguments to make that they have been at the mercy of a ruthless Wall Street.
I mean, the
But
Asians in 1997 certainly a strong argument that the IMF imposed rescue package was worse in some ways than the crisis itself. And none other than the legendary Lee Kuan Yew said it didn't just destroy the economies, but it ripped apart social fabrics. And and just one data point to that: you do not sell your crown jewels at what's that term, at firehouse sales. If
bargain basement.
Yes,
Rates.
exactly. And that is what the IMF forced governments to do. So yes, of course, there is an element of truth to that, but at the same time, often it's self-serving too.
Yes, the self-serving part, I think, is in this instance really the operative one. The philosophical or cultural ones are sincere, but I think not driving the process really. The BRICS is a tool, a building block. How's that for a good use of words? A brick is a building block of the efforts, in particular, of Russia and China, but not only, to challenge or get out from under the normative world order. Russia and China have two distinct approaches to how they think the international order or system should shape up. Russia very clearly sees any step taken to weaken the Western, which means U.S., as far as they're concerned, influence, is a winning step to take because it increases Russia's leverage. So they seek a very clear sphere of influence, bilateral, transactional, international system. China is different. It seeks to supplant American hegemony with its own. It wishes to be the first one making the rules, as the U.S. has been, and at the same time to establish what largely has occurred, if it's and certainly is occurring, which also is a sphere of influence, international order, which is largely transactional. It's also a traditional Chinese approach where the Middle Kingdom is the center of the universe. Beijing is, not Washington. And they're happy to have countries make deals to come pay homage to the larger power, which will largely set the terms. And they say, well, the West has done that, the U.S. has done that, so why should we not? And that's a good question. But the BRIC conference is a way to challenge this normative order. What we now call the global South, we used to call the third world, it sees a lot of attractions from this approach because it allows them to cut deals that benefit them respectively, such as the poster boy for this example is India right now, which has increased its oil purchases from Russia by more than tenfold since Russia invaded Ukraine at below global market rates. So it's a good deal for Russia. And the only cost is the elimination of Ukraine as Ukraine's existence. But that's not a vital interest of India's. Getting cheap oil so it can continue to develop economically is. So you have this push by the rising powers revisionist powers, you could say, to challenge, basically to redraw and undermine what has been the way the international countries have dealt with each other since 1945. This is of benefit, as I say, in a narrow sense, to other global South countries because they can cut good deals. It's a purely transactional approach, good for them, each member, until it isn't. If you're Ukraine, or if you are the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Brunei, Thailand, South Korea, so on, then the lack of a rules-based system is not so good when China wishes to do what it feels like doing, irrespective of any theoretical norm. And it's even fine for a country as strong as India until China decides that it wants to move its border X kilometers south, uh, and then all of a sudden the BRICS transactional bilateral sphere of influence system that this fosters and represents is less attractive.
But to be fair, Glenn, push back against that uh, um, argument. Indians would say, look, it's Russians who brokered a border deal between India and China. And if we go back long enough, and this is where the anti-colonial memory kicks in, the US sided with Pakistan, run, of course, by a military dictatorship, in the genocide of Bangladeshis, and of course the mass rape as well. There was none other than an American diplomat who wrote the book The Blood Telegram. There's a book written about him, talked about it. So that memory hasn't gone, and the feeling is that the US doesn't have enough leverage to conduct a deal between India and China, and the West will never ever stand up for India as it stood up for Ukraine, because India is not of vital strategic or national interest, whilst Ukraine is.
Well, there's no shortage of specific reasons why that one can cite to justify or rationalize one's unilateral or bilateral transactional approaches. That's true. I think when one looks at the collective data on currency stability and strength, on GDP growth rate, on actually levels of conflict, that the argument becomes more than compelling that the normative system offers overall larger benefits to each member. But there are an infinite number of specific cases when one can say, well, so and so acted cynically, or country X, the United States acted cynically or unilaterally, and so why should I not? That's the case. This is the great dilemma: is of the tragedy of the commons, that there are always compelling reasons for individuals to act in their own benefit, which ultimately leads to a collective collapse of the system and harm to the individuals themselves. But the BRICS the BRICS summit really is a relatively successful step by Russia and China and the other participants to at least affirm in principle their independence and to move to have more freedom of maneuver from the Western system. Short term, no question. I think India is benefiting from this approach with regard to oil. Whether long term, would India prefer to have the kind of financial arrangements that China seems to use as opposed to the Western financial system? I think the answer to that is clearly no, but it's hard to turn down a good deal when it presents itself. So what will, just to conclude this, what do I think this implies, the BRICS summit implies substantively? I think it's clear, independent of BRICS, which is just a minor thing at this point, institutions will slowly emerge, superseding post-war organizations for some issues. I think here the classic example is the United Nations Security Council. And there's been an effort by India and by many to have India become a permanent member of the Security Council, co-equal with the other five, quote, great powers. That hasn't happened and is, frankly, I think, unlikely to happen. So what is likely to happen is that as India's influence continues to rise, alternative institutions will come progressively piecemeal to supplant the ostensible but largely failed functions of, in this instance, my example, of the UN Security Council. The BRICS is a step to do that sort of supplanting and bypassing of problematic international institutions. It's a sign, the BRICS summit, frankly, of the normative decay. It itself is feckless, but successful geopolitically, and the substance is almost, in this instance, secondary because it's a symbol of what is happening in the larger macro sense internationally.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.